Self-compassion is our compassionate self, this relating with kindness to where there's pain, is kind of the big domain. One of the areas within self-compassion that is most difficult is when somebody feels like they've caused harm to themselves or to somebody else. And so I find that it becomes more of the flavor of self-forgiveness, that there is a sense of, I've caused injury and I can't stand myself for that. So I'd like to take some time this morning to explore, how do we work with clients when you can listen to them and know what they need is to forgive themselves, right? I mean, is that something that you've noticed, that you get to a point with something and you just know that it's just about it, and the word forgiveness fits. Now, forgive does not mean in reality you blew it and yet, you have sinned, but now I offer you forgiveness. It's not like that. But for most people, this feeling of, well, my addiction is destroying me or destroying someone else, something like that, is it feels very, very unforgivable. So the inquiry then is, what is it that helps? And some of you might have remember this from being with me, but I like this story of a man and a woman sitting beside each other. They're in the first class section of a plane, and the woman sneezes, takes out a tissue, gently wipes her nose, and then shudders violently for 10 to 15 seconds. The man goes back to his reading. A few minutes later, the woman sneezes again. Same thing happens, takes out the tissue, then shudders. He's curious, what's going on? She does it one more time, takes out the tissue, wipes her nose, shudders violently, and this time he asks, so what's going on? You sneeze, and then you shudder, are you all right? And she goes, oh, I'm sorry, I've disturbed you. She says, I have a rare condition. When I sneeze, I have an orgasm. And the man's a little embarrassed, but he's even more curious. So he says, well, I've never heard of that before. What are you taking for it? And the woman looked at him and said, pepper. So we're usually not so easy on ourselves for our compulsive behaviors, and we know how we organize around them. We know it. So I've described the cycle of shame, and I want to give you an example of it that happens when our false refuge is one where it's clearly destructive to ourselves or others, and then we blame ourselves, and then the blame just refuels the same behavior, okay? Because that's the way it goes. We're caught in this looping. So this is a woman I worked with some years ago now, Sarah. She came to a meditation retreat I was leading, and she was a binge eater and was working the 11th step. So she was really trying to see how she could use prayer and meditation to be able to work with this compulsive overeating. And when she got to the retreat, she was feeling very, very obsessed. And one of the things we don't talk about much at meditation retreats is how right at the retreat, there's all this food, and everybody has transplanted all their eating issues to the retreat, and it's all going on. And this might maybe seem extreme, but I think most people have eating disorders. I mean, it's the earliest way we try to control our experience is through food. And so if there's some imbalance and disruption in our family system, that's the quickest and easiest way to self-soothe. So there she is at the retreat, and she's feeling that at each meal she's eating too much, and she's kind of sneaking. One of the things that you can do at some of these places is you can get your serving and eat, and then go back for seconds, and then go take your plate somewhere else and have your second somewhere else so people don't notice, and that's what she was doing. And so we talked about just starting by just noticing what was going on and seeing if she could notice without the gun. Noticing the shame, noticing the fear, noticing of other people's seeing you, noticing the frustration. So she was sitting in meditation and watching her thoughts and feelings and the fears and also the craving, the craving and then the hopelessness. She would go into this hopelessness of, here I am, I'm at a retreat and it's never going to change. That's the pain of it. And suddenly she had this realization that it was like this never-ending parade of thoughts and feelings, and it was just all going on its own. It's like she wasn't directing it, she wasn't asking for the thoughts, it was just playing itself out. And when she saw that, she got a glimmer of, it's not my fault. It's just happening. It's like, I didn't ask for it to happen like this. I didn't ask for this craving. I didn't ask for all this conniving and strategizing my mind about how to get another portion, or this fear or this shame. And so there was this opening. It's like there she was recognizing and allowing what was going on, and then she had this insight into this parade, and it's not my fault. So that gave her some lightness, this sense that she wasn't causing her addiction. And she began to look more closely, and she began to investigate in a way what we call comprehensive mindfulness, and sensing all the conditioning from the culture and from her background that would create something that really wasn't her fault. And for this woman, she was in a culture telling a big bone, not genetically skinny woman that she didn't make the grade, and that was part of it. And then the shame of that, and then that would just generate more eating. Or that her mother was alcoholic, and who knows what happens in the womb when you get addicted to sugar, the alcohol in the womb, and how much that plays into binge eating. Or that her father was emotionally distant. So she just began to, from that vantage point of, there's not a self causing this, she started seeing some of the different causes and conditions which are part of it. And it's very true that if we begin to investigate and we can step out of the second arrow, we'll start seeing how much has created what's going on. One of the studies that impressed me was of chimps, and when the mother was insecure because of unpredictable feeding, she wasn't sure when she was going to get her food. Her way of rearing her child was such that the child, for the rest of that chimp's life, had an imbalance of serotonin, had anxiety disorder, and became a binge eater. It's binging is one of the. So here you have a mother that's insecure. I mean, how many of us had mothers that weren't fully attentive, And then we go for something else. And so sad, we then hate ourselves or we feel loathing or shame because we feel in some way out of control about food. It's not our fault. So just the way I mentioned earlier, sometimes when there's been something that happened like a rape, initially saying it's my fault might give a sense of, it diminishes some of the helplessness, and it gives a sense of locus of control. A lifelong sense of it's my fault for these false refuges locks us in a way that's real suffering. So she began her practice more and more of, when she started feeling caught, in some way sending that message, it's not my fault, it's just happening. This is another way of kind of saying self-forgiveness. And she started releasing that added layer of shame, that secondary shame that keeps the spinning going. And for her, it didn't remove responsibility, because that's the fear. If I say, oh, it's not my fault, then it'll be like, oh, I'm not responsible, that, then whatever goes, goes. It wasn't that at all. It actually gave her more freedom to respond wisely to the situation. Piece of research just to share with you on this is that one experiment was set up so that participants were given a restrictive eating test that measured their desire to avoid forbidden foods. And then they were divided into different groups, and some of them were asked to eat a donut, and then they were given a bogus story on why they should then go eat some more candies. And but they were told, but some of that group were told in between, after the donut, but before the candies, that they were given a kind of message, oh, don't be hard on yourself. We hope you won't be hard on yourself. Everyone around here eats unhealthy, and people in the study are always eating this stuff. As it turned out, those that heard that message, don't be so hard on yourself, ended up, the highly restrictive eaters that heard that message ended up having less distress and eating fewer candies. There's a certain soothing and balancing and freeing up that happens when there's some message of, it's not your fault. It's okay. Don't take it so personally. Okay? So for this woman, back to Sarah, that she would periodically encounter, say, it's not my fault, and encounter this really big surge of, it is too, and the old self-loathing would really, really be strong. And she just had to keep practicing with feeling it, being with it, kind of holding it with kindness. But in time, she found that the basic wisdom and kindness of being with her experience and not blaming herself actually shifted her sense of identity. That rather than being the obsessed, compulsive, out-of-control eater, she became that presence or awareness that was noticing what was happening and offering a kindly message. So that was the shift. So I want to just say that this is to me, one of the powers of the 12-step groups, is that it's not as personal. It's profound to remove that layering of shame. It's profound. And so it's one of the things that as clinicians, one of the biggest gifts we can offer is if we are not judging, truly not judging, if we're not looking at somebody who is out of control, or as Charles brought up, who is breaking laws, no matter what they're doing, if we don't have that judgment of bad personhood, we might say, we need to change this so that you can be happier, but not that personal, it's your fault and blame. That atmosphere of respect and care is something that mirroring begins to loosen it. If we can even further loosen it by having them begin to get, really from their own heart, it's not my fault, it opens up a space to begin to work with the primary issue, the primary wounds that person's experiencing.